Ladies and gentlemen, in the status quo, we are able to see the case of Yu Young-ter when he has killed basically 20 women and went on and raped them and so on and so forth. But the fact is, although the fact that he's assigned a death penalty, we are able to see that this is actually not in action. We're actually also able to see a case when this man randomly kills 50 people and he even shows no remorse. Yet again, we keep these two people and so on and other people who have done such crimes basically in jail for their life sentence. Either assigned death penalty or not, and basically just staying in jail and not even remorsing and basically having no chance of rehabilitation. We're basically using the money that is basically from the citizens and allowing them to live on with their lives when they are basically showing no remorse, which is supposed to be the purpose of sending them in jail in the first place. So ladies and gentlemen, this is why we're here today debating under the motion that this House would introduce death penalty in South Korea. Before I move on to introducing our arguments, I would like to first of all define the motion. By death penalty, we mean capital punishment, which is when we take away the right to live of these criminals. And in this case, we're going to make sure that there's thorough investigation that is done that will actually provide concrete evidence, and also we'll make sure that these criminals have been proven to be psychologically unstable, such as psychopaths, and through various tests, and who are basically not showing any possibilities of rehabilitating. So. Today, side government has three arguments. First of all, the social message. Second of all, the necessity. And third, about how this policy is going to be cost effective. The first two arguments are going to be introduced by the Prime Minister, and our third argument about the cost efficiency is going to be introduced by our Deputy Prime Minister. Moving on to our first argument about how this basically sends a social message. In the current status quo, we're able to see that although criminals are basically sentenced to life in jail, we're able to see that sometimes they're actually sent back to their normal lives by parole, and they're basically living on with their lives. And also in the case where they're still staying in the jail, they're living in this wall-fed prison. So in this So we're able to see that these clearly these punishments for the fact that when these people have killed like 20 people and 50 people and raped them and so on and so forth, we're able to see that this is not enough. So by having death penalty, we believe that we're able to send two social messages. First of all, we're able to show that the government is responsible, and second of all, we'll also be able to show that there are going to be harsh punishments to harsh crimes that are done. So, first of all, to elaborate on the first point about how this shows that the government is being responsible, we're able to see that by having this policy, we're able to show that the government is going to make actions when they are able to have concrete evidence about these crimes, and will actually make sure that the other citizens who do not have any participation in these actions will actually be provided a much more safer environment. It would also show that this would allow these people to not be out of their prison jails and actually provide much more stability in the society. Yes.
Do you honestly believe that serial killers like Yu Young-ter, for instance, would be able to get out of their high-security prison cells and somehow damage the society and pose more harm to the society? Is that what you're saying?
Pretty restrained.
You said that by the government killing these criminals, the society will be more safe. Do you think that these serial killers will somehow escape prison and somehow kill people so the society is more damaged? Is that your logic?
We were talking about the cases when they are actually set free by the parole, but in the case of Yu Young-ter, like he's mentioned before, we believe that this basically falls under our third argument, which is going to be elaborated by our Deputy Prime Minister regarding the cost efficiency of this policy, because we're clearly able to show that when the citizens are being, which is actually going to be elaborated later on, about how the citizens paying for their life is not actually fair. Now, moving on to our second part of this argument about how there's going to be a deterrence effect, by also the similar logic of showing that harsh punishments are going to be done as a result of harsh crimes, we're able to see that possible criminals to be will actually be rather discouraged for their actions, their future actions, and will actually not commit such crimes. Moving on to our second argument about the necessity. Team government currently believes that the punishment that is actually existing in the current status quo is too weak. We believe that for higher crimes, there needs to be higher punishments. And we know for a fact that these certain crimes that we're discussing upon today and here in this debate are basically cases where these criminals have basically infringed upon the basic human morality. And we believe that by allowing these criminals to perhaps live on with their lives and or perhaps go out into parole will actually cause a this current situation right now is rather not as effective as it should be, or is actually dealing with the problem as it should be. Yes. So today, Team Government basically would like to provide two arguments. First of all, the fact that this will send a social message that the government is responsible, and second of all, the fact that this is actually necessary. Thank you.
Okay. For around 5 minutes, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, I'd like to invite Han성이 to the podium. Here you are.
나 떡밥을 많이 던져줘야 돼. I don't have anything to say.
이거 다 손으로. May I start?
Yep.
Now, we on Team Opposition would like to clarify some things that the government seems to misunderstand about us. First of all, we're rational. We actually have the ability to think, so we know that when criminals do crimes, they have to pay for it. And second of all, because we're rational, we also know the side effects about death penalty and capital punishment, and we also believe that there are more actually problems to this policy than there are benefits for us to oppose to this problem. So we would just like the government to understand that. And before I go on to my rebuttals, or actually my constructive arguments, I would like to just introduce a simple and also interesting statistics. It says, I've usually been interested in this miserable, so it's sort of a reference here. But among 107 people in the 1990s who were inflicted by capital punishment, about 23 of them were Zhang Valjeans. They were either innocent, or the crimes were too little, or the crimes were too, not appropriate to the charges, or actually the standards of capital punishment to actually be punished, yet they were punished. And ladies and gentlemen, would we actually want more Zhang Valjeans or more innocent people among these victims of capital punishment to appear in our society? And no, we would not like that to happen. So, moving on to my rebuttals and my arguments. First of all, the Prime Minister came up and here to say that, this capital punishment sort of implies a social message. It says that criminals living in prisons is not enough, ladies and gentlemen. However, ladies and gentlemen, isolating criminals from the society where normal people and other innocent people live, isn't that enough? Because those criminals can't actually do anything within their own isolated prisons, and they can't actually imply any harms on the prison itself. And also, this actually also relates to how cost-effective, the question on how cost-effective capital punishment actually is, which will be introduced in my second point, constructive point. And second of all, now the Prime Minister came up and said that harsh punishments should be be a response to harsh crimes, and this can actually convey a message of deterrence and message of you can't do that, you can't do these crimes, and also lead to more deterrence in crimes. However, ladies and gentlemen, the U.S. Statistics Office actually showed that among states that actually allowed capital punishment, among 100,000 people, 14 people were actually murderers and convicted of these capital punishments. But when states without capital punishment, about 100,000 people, among 100,000 people, 5 of them were only capital punishment, which also actually does not actually prove the relation between deterrence and capital punishment. No, thank you. We like to actually just question the government side on that statistic. Now, moving on to my constructive arguments, because my constructive arguments sort of respond as rebuttals to the government side's argument today. We would like to actually introduce 3 points in our opposition stance today. First of all, I as a Prime Minister would like to introduce the 2 main points. First of all, about the justification of this policy, and second of all, the effectiveness of the policy. And our Deputy Prime Minister, Ji-sung right there, will like to talk about the social implications and also provide rebuttals to the government side of this debate today. Now, moving on to my definition, not the definition, but my constructive arguments. First of all, I would like to talk about the justification of capital punishment. Now, ladies and gentlemen, when murderers actually murder a person or the innocent citizen, as the government side sort of argues today, they're actually committing an act of breaking social contract, the contract between the government and that individual murderer or that person before. However, ladies and gentlemen, breaking the social contract does not actually directly due to taking away that person's life. Rather, it actually goes on to limit social rights of that person, not taking away the fundamental right to live as a human from that person. And so, what we would like to prove today is that it does not, the Hammurabi law, or well, any other ancient law of eye for an eye, does not actually establish in the 21st century right now, in these modern times, because social rights equal to social rights, yes, we agree with that, but social rights do not actually equal to the basic right to live, which is what the government is trying to argue today. Moreover, we'd like to actually shift the focus on the question on capital punishment, because the government tries to bring up the question today with these radical assumptions that every murder will kill 20 or 50 people. We're not trying to weigh values on lives or anything like that, but we're just trying to say it's not the question on whether these people did any wrong enough to get killed, but rather does the government, or can the government take the people's lives? Because throughout history, ladies and gentlemen, throughout history, we've actually seen various examples, such as in 1800 America, or even in the recent 1990s, when they actually abused the rights to police, the right to authorities to actually oppress the citizens that we see in society. We can see this from the king oppression and the LA violence crimes, ladies and gentlemen. We can actually see from these. And when there's the opinion or the opportunity for these governments to actually abuse, or actually when there's also the past history of these governments that they actually committed domestic violence against the citizens, when they have this right hand, can we actually trust the government with these rights? And does the government actually have no responsibility from the past acts they did throughout history? We would just like to shift the focus on that. As a sub-point, I just introduced some statistics from my introduction, so I'd like to move on to my second constructive point. Second of all, we'd like to talk about the effectiveness of this policy as a whole. Now, as I mentioned before, this policy, capital punishment, is not only inefficient in deterring crime, but it's also inefficient in protecting the people that the government also dearly tries to protect right now. Because, basically, capital punishment trials right now cost about $3.2 million on a regular basis. However, keeping a social criminal inmate in prison costs only about $16,000. So we're actually trying to, instead of trying to make this person alive for 200 years, which could actually be more cost efficient than actually killing this person right on the top, and actually also bringing the same effects of socially deterring the crimes, socially isolating the person from doing more crimes, the government is trying to come up and actually argue about a more cost-efficient, non-cost efficient policy right now. And we like to say that the government should not be using up the citizens' money, the citizens' taxes on these criminals. The government should do the more efficient way on trying to deter these crimes. We're just trying to say that the government's argument right now, or the government's stance right now, is not efficient enough to, effectively respond to these kind of standards. Now, what I talked about you today, first of all, about the justification of social punishment, as in death penalty or capital punishment, and second of all, the effectiveness, the question of effectiveness of these punishments. And so, based on these proof points, we on the government are actually proud to oppose opposition. Actually, thank you.
The speaker spoke for 7 minutes and 22 seconds. Now I would like to invite the second speaker from the government. Here. Armin?
Dear Mr. Madam Speaker, in today's debate, we're not talking about petty criminals like Jungle John or people who just, commit little petty crimes, misdemeanors. But we're talking about extremely severe criminals who does not comply with the rules of the society, who causes extreme harm to the society, to the people, and who shows no sign of rehabilitation. In today's debate, in order to understand why death penalty is necessary for the victims and for the society, we have to consider 3 standards, and those standards are first of all intent, second of all effect, and thirdly aftermath. By intent, we mean that these criminals, under our definition of death penalty, who should be subject to death penalty, are people who have very malicious and non-provocative intent in committing these crimes, such as murder or rape. Secondly, about the effect, they cause extreme harm to the society by in sheer number, they kill more people, or they cause permanent damage to more amount of people. That is the severe effect that these criminals have on the society. And lastly, most importantly, we're talking about aftermath. Under our definition, we told you that we will only kill criminals who, first of all, who cause extreme harm to society and shows no sign of rehabilitation, and secondly, we'll provide them psychological tests to see if they're psychopaths, if they have mental problems that basically bans them from being rehabilitated again, even if they stay in prison. So, because of this third standard of aftermath, we see that there is very little chance of rehabilitation, reconciliation for these criminals. This is the reason why the opposition believes that such harsh, tough measures are needed. Now, before we go on to the constructive or the rebuttals, I'd like to quote from a very famous psychopathic murderer in South Korea, codenamed J. Now, he quoted, to go to the concise point, the only punishment that I can receive is to kill me, because I do not feel remorse at my crimes. I do not want to rehabilitate. I won't be rehabilitated by government programs. The only punishment that the government can do to me is to kill me. So as we can see in this concrete examples, these criminals are, under our definition, the types of people that we want to pose death penalty in, because we believe that these people, not only do they cause extreme harm to society, they do not show any sign of remorse. There is no possibility of rehabilitating them into becoming more responsible members of society. And as we'll prove in the rebuttals and more constructive cases, no thank you sir, we'll see that the current measures are not enough to effectively punish these people and to protect the society from more potential criminals. Now, with that done, before I go into the constructive case of the government style, I would first like to refute the point presented by the opposition, which was first of all about justification and second about efficiency. So first of all, about justification, the leader of opposition came up to the podium and talked about social contract. Just because a social contract is broken, we cannot directly take away their social rights. Ladies and gentlemen, that is absolutely true. Just because someone broke a social contract, the imminent punishment is not this. But let's look at the no, thank you, sir. Let's look at the social context, the definition of this debate. We're not talking about all criminals who have broken social contract. We're talking about criminals who have broken social contract into such extreme level that other, more specific type of harsh punishment is necessary. These criminals who commit violent crimes such as Yu Young-chul or Cho Jo-seung, they do not properly use their social rights.
Sir.
They are not responsible in just a moment, sir. They are not responsible members of the society who wants to live peacefully with other people in harmony. There are people who want to wreak havoc because they are either psychopaths or they have problems within the society. That is the reason why no more laws of social contract cannot be applied in this case. Yes, sir.
One question. Are you denying the criminals the right to be human, or are you denying the right for them to be citizens?
We're denying both. Why? Because we're looking at a very specific case where these criminals do not have humanity itself. By humanity, we mean we're talking conscience. We're talking about these people, their ability to feel remorse at the wrongs they did. We're talking about the basic humanity that most of us have. But under our definition, these criminals who passes those psychological evaluations prove themselves to be criminals and people who are subhumane. They do not feel such humane emotions that we feel. That's the reason why we believe that such notions, such laws of social contract cannot be applied in this specific case. No, thank you, sir. And we see that the leader opposition came up to the podium and talked about, we can make mistakes. Ladies and gentlemen, no law is perfect, no policy is perfect, but we're saying that, first of all, technology has advanced since the 1990s to more effectively prove whether these criminals are actually innocent or not. We see that through more advancement in technology, we can effectively minimize such side effects. And we're saying that we're not talking about, and they also talked about how this can be abused by the local administration or the government to prosecute certain parties of interest. But ladies and gentlemen, again, under our definition, we're talking about violences that are committed directly from person to person. There cannot be a political intervention in a murder case, because these murderers do not commit acts according to political interest, but because they have certain motives that are beyond humane control. We see that in these cases where we would like to apply the capital punishment into them, such cases do not apply. Now, again, they talk about efficiency, but that will be rebutted by the constructive case of the proposition side. So to go on to the third and the last case of the proposition, we'd like to talk about the cost efficiency. How the death penalty is actually more cost effective than the current stance the government takes. Now, first of all, our stance is, we would like to make our stance very clear. We're not talking about saving, just money. We're not talking about such physical, we're not talking about such cost-effective cases in terms of feasible amounts of money. We're talking about putting more burden on ordinary innocent citizens to help to basically keep these criminals alive. These money that we use to build prisons, to keep these prisons safe, to keep these prisoners from coming out of their facilities, we put in a lot of taxpayers' money. We see that this is not just about saving the money of these people a little bit, we're going to the basic notion, the principle of should he waste the innocent people's money to keep these criminals alive and safe. We see that we believe there's a very fundamental social contradiction in that notion. We're saying that we cannot waste government money to save these criminals by using the money of these innocent people who are potential victims to these criminals. We're basically saying that we're going to make victims pay to keep these criminals alive. So we see that that is a very contradictory case. Now, in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, we believe that there needs to be different levels of punishment for different levels of crimes. In our definition, the people we're talking about are people who cause extreme harm to society and who there is very minimal chance of rehabilitation. And because of that, we believe that there needs to be tougher, harsher measures to both punish these criminals, to send out a social message that we're against these crimes, and to further elaborate on the point that we're not going to wasting money of the innocent taxpayer people to keep these criminals alive. For those reasons, we were proud to propose. Thank you.
Thank you. Speakers spoke for 7 minutes and 24 seconds. Now I would like to invite the last speaker of this debate, Sung-hee, to the podium. Here.
The last debater?
Yep.
Yeah, so I'll just do a clash. I'll just do a literal clash with them. Just go. Okay, I'm screwed. Hey, do you have time?
빨리 액션 없어.
Yeah, we don't have time.
Kind of do. Why did you do this?
Just to know I'm not going to be entertaining in this debate, because I tried that and it sucked. Okay, so. And just one premise though. They can't win third in the debate. Let's go. I pledge of allegiance to Third, the mighty debater of Cogito Habs. Here. Ladies and gentlemen, let me quote from Third, and from one of his most famous battles of YTN in 2013. Okay. It was this. If just because you're hungry doesn't mean you can eat garbage. Now, okay, don't imply here that we're not saying that their policy is completely garbage. We accept the fact that they're trying to solve the problems related to serial killers, right? Serious criminals that are somehow endangering the society, but yeah, somehow we need a deterrence effect or a strong policy to solve these problems. But we see, ladies and gentlemen, that just because a problem is there doesn't mean every policy designed to solve a specific problem is automatically justified. You have to consider the efficiency issue, you have to consider the justification issue, and finally you have to consider the social implications. So let's look at these three fundamental things right now in today's debate. Actually, by rebutting their case, let's look at their first constructive. Their first constructive was that there would be the social message. Two social messages, actually. The first was that the government will be responsible. Here, their analysis was that the government will somehow look responsible because the society will become safer. But we have three responses to this. First off, they didn't really give us a good enough mechanism as to how the society will become automatically safer, right? We first, ladies and gentlemen, think that if they really wanted to say that the society will somehow become safer, then we see that they had to do three things. First, they had to first prove how a society without capital punishment is more dangerous than a society with capital punishment. Nothing done there. Second, how capital punishment provides better security for the citizens directly. So here, ladies and gentlemen, they had to prove how serial killers that are already kept in prison cells, for instance, would do society more security by getting killed off by government officials through drug injections or being seated in electric chairs. right, ladies and gentlemen? We don't see how criminals, serial killers that are already locked up in prison will do the society more damage, but less damage by killing themselves off, or at least getting killed by the government. Is there a possibility that they'll somehow escape from these advanced security prison cells that we have now in the society? We really highly doubt that. Therefore, they're not trying to improve security situations and protect the citizens in any way directly through their policy. So the only justification they have is deterrence, but we're going to break that soon enough. So the third point, they had to give us the factual proof for truth analysis. It's obvious, right? But it's an impromptu debate. We're going to be nice. We're not going to ask them to give us statistics, but we're going to. So let's look at the second aspect, the deterrence effect. Okay, the timer. Okay, it's screwed. Okay, so the second effect, the deterrence effect. Here, they said that if a serial killer gets killed for doing all these heinous crimes, somehow this is going to send the society a message, hey, if you do something bad, you're going to get really badly punished for it. We have two responses. First off, we see that this is not really the case for most of the criminals. They're severely limited the case, right? Because, ladies and gentlemen, we see that if serial killers, as they said, are crazy, not mentally standing, right? So we see, ladies and gentlemen, that if serial killers, we're talking about serial killers, as they said in today's debate, right? It is somehow killing off other serial killers going to let serial killers that are not in jail make rational decisions so that they commit less crimes, ladies and gentlemen. We see that itself is wrong, because we're debating under the premise that serial killers are mentally ill. So can they make rational decisions based on the fact that you'll get more punishment because if you do more worse things? We see that because this issue has not been solved upon by the government side, their arguments completely fail. So let's look at the second aspect of today's debate, the necessity. Here, they said something very good. High crimes deserve higher punishment. Yeah, we agree with this, ladies and gentlemen, but we do not really see how their policy really ensures that, right? Because, ladies and gentlemen, as far as I know, Korea does have capital punishment. It's just that Korea is not enacting it upon the criminals, right? So we thought that this debate was about, okay, we keep death penalty or not, and then they had to talk about how they will impose death penalty directly, actively, right now upon the criminals that deserve death penalty right now. We see that they had to expand their policy like that, otherwise they're just keeping the status quo. They're not doing anything to improve the status quo, ladies and gentlemen, unless they're making a policy to directly kill the criminals right now that got death penalty. But they didn't. They didn't really expand their logic. So therefore, we say that their necessity argument completely fails. And second off, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to provide you a statistical information here. And actually, this is correlated to the deterrence effect. Because, ladies and gentlemen, as our wonderful first speaker mentioned, in the case of the United States of America, states with capital punishment had 14 murderers out of 100,000. States that didn't have capital punishment had 5 murderers out of 100,000. Now, the difference 9 might be little, but if you compare the percentages, we see that the number is more than twice high. The number of murderers within a state is twice as high in states in capital punishment than states without capital punishment. This simply proves, ladies and gentlemen, how capital punishment does not necessarily stop or decrease crimes in the first place, right? We see that under this statistical information, they have no factual evidence to say that the deterrence effect does occur under capital punishment. We see that logic simply falls down completely.
Sir?
Yes, sir.
So can you be sure that whether there is capital punishment in this state or not is the only factor in deciding how many murders are in the country, in the state?
I didn't get your question. Can you repeat it? I didn't get this question, but I'm sure that was answered already. Anyways, let's look at the third issue, the necessity. Now here, ladies and gentlemen, they talked about something very interesting. They said that, okay, these criminals, if you keep them in jail, they're going to somehow cost the society more money, and that is very negative because the government somehow is supporting money to keep these killers that did the society damage. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, first off, we would like to state the fact that this is factually wrong. Because in the case of the state of California, as our previous speaker mentioned, it costed $3.2 million to put a person through capital punishment, but it costed $16,000 to keep an inmate in prison for 1 year in a highly technologically advanced prison cell. So if you cannot prove to us that criminal can stay alive, breathing in cell for 200 years if you do the math, capital punishment obviously costs more. So we see, ladies and gentlemen, that there's a factual error here. So that was 7 minutes? Okay. I couldn't see the timer, sorry. So ladies and gentlemen, let's look. The third constructive argument actually had to do with the justification and the social implications, but I think we clearly mentioned this to you. First off, through basically our arguments. So basically, we think that the government's image will become worse if, for instance, ladies and gentlemen, they waste resources, money especially, on capital punishment that simply costs more as their statistical information goes, right? We think that if the government waste citizen taxes for a policy that is simply ineffective in protecting the citizens, that's something that the government is not doing well, and that's going to cause a negative social image. And second off, ladies and gentlemen, what we're saying is the government is committing violence to stop another violence from happening, right? We think that that is fundamentally wrong, because number one, we think, ladies and gentlemen, that first off, South Korea is fundamentally different from... Okay, the time is up. So, sorry. I'll just end my speech here. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening.
The speaker spoke for 8 minutes.